afternoon, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Strategic Business Planning for the Independent Physician Practice, brought to you by Debbie Mappy and Susan Reed of Sachs LLP. Please be aware that there will be a question and answer portion today at the end of the webinar. To avoid frequent interruptions during the webinar, please type your questions in the question box located to the right of your screen. They will be answered in the order received during the question and answer portion. Additionally, an electronic version of the presentation will be emailed to all participants following completion of today's webinar, and a recorded version will be available on the website for members only. Again, we would like to thank you for attending, and I'll now turn things over to Debbie and Susan.
Hi, good afternoon. We thank you for joining us for this very important topic, how you plan for business success. My name is Susan Reed, and I'm the Healthcare Practice Leader at Sachs LLP. We're an accounting firm that's in New Jersey and New York, and Debbie and I specifically focus on helping physician practices stay independent. And one of the best ways to do that is by figuring out how to plan for your success.
Hi, my name is Debbie Nappy. I'm also here with Susan today, and we just want to thank you for spending your lunchtime with us, and we're going to begin our session.
Okay, so we're going to start with just a general overview of our presentation today. We're going to talk about the importance of planning for success. We're going to help you understand what a business plan is and contrast that to what a strategic plan is. We're going to help you understand the importance of building a financial framework, and we're going to talk to you about budgeting to control costs. So Debbie, we know that those in medical practice governance are operating in uncharted waters.
So yes, there are so many challenges at this time. There's unprecedented pressure on continuous downward reimbursements. There's increasing regulatory requirements. We have MACRA, MIPS, the new added network bill, HIPAA, unpredictable referral sources, and the entire push toward value-based medicine. In addition, you just cannot remain stagnant. If you want to thrive, you want to flourish, you need to be able to remain flexible and continue with the pace of the changes. And in our presentation today, one of the keys to remaining relevant is to invest the time in planning your best route forward. When planning for success becomes an integral part of your organization, you will then have tools for your competitive advantage. In our discussion today, we're going to be looking at both a business plan and a strategic plan. They're both essential for your business, and we're going to scale it for any size. In this, we don't want you to become overwhelmed when we go through the steps. Just remember that any information or anything that you're doing to work towards these plans is going to be beneficial. The main difference between the two is that a business plan is typically done as a feasibility study for a new business or when you began your practice, a service line, while the strategic plan is the short-term plan to help you to now reach attainable goals. So Sue, let's dive a little deeper into both and identify why they directly benefit the overall health of your practice.
So a business plan really serves as a foundation for your practice. It shows you where you're starting, where you want your business to be in the future, and how you plan to get there. Your business plan should address the question of who, your customers, your competition, your management team, as well as addressing the question of what, the services your business will provide. Portions of your plans may change over time, but when challenges come up, the business plan will help you keep focused on the goals that you've established for your practice. And we certainly know those challenges will pop up probably almost every day in your practice. For practices that are considering forming a new medical group, it's certainly imperative that you produce a strong business plan to assess the viability of a new group. There's lots of supergroup formations, lots of merger activity, and before you step forward in any of those processes, you certainly want to make sure that you do a very detailed business plan. Now, the preparation of business plan does often require the use of outside professionals and services. We're not expecting everybody within a practice to have these skill sets, and therefore you may need somebody to assist you, for instance, with doing market analysis, or use a facilitator to help guide your practice through the strategic or business planning processes. There's certainly going to be 3 people that are going to be very helpful in guiding you through your practice startup: your accountant, your legal advisor, and in some cases, a practice startup consultant. But as Debbie mentioned before, the one thing we don't want you to do is obsess about necessarily all the details. Just getting a plan on paper is certainly a good start for your practice.
Okay, so I'm going to go through what portions a business plan encompasses. A formal business plan should contain the following sections. You have the executive summary. This is the introduction to the business plan. A high-level narrative summarizing your overall plan can be a standalone document used for internal or external use. Should highlight your successes, summarize your future plans. If you're just a startup, it would focus on industry analysis and corporate structure. Your practice description. A detailed description of your practice service offerings, your specific areas of expertise, and the identification of your target audience or population health. Market analysis. This demonstrates the knowledge of the market that you're in. A detailed outline of your target market where you will provide services coupled with a review of your competition. It includes your patient demographics. How will you practice to gain market share in your area? A formal business plan should contain the following sections as well. You have your marketing and sales. Identify the growth goals and a detailed analysis of the marketing efforts required to promote your services. In this, be clear. Are you going to utilize pamphlets, social media? Try to determine how are you going to market your existing practice or a new practice. Your management team. A detailed outline of the skill sets needed of your management team and the specific staff needs. This would be your key personnel. Highlight management's industry success. And also, most important, your finance and operations. A detailed financial and operational projections for the startup and the management of your practice. Projections should be created for expected expenses and revenues for the next several years. This is your cash flow. This is giving you an idea as to, if you are a startup, what is it going to look like? You would also utilize this for your financing when you go to your banking organization to try to provide a capital loan. So now provide us with some of the examples of how you've helped an existing client in this area.
So when we think of business plans, we certainly want to do that at the formation of a practice. But when your practice is considering potentially adding a new service, it's a good time to even consider doing a mini business plan for that new service. So for instance, I worked with a multi-specialty group, and they were considering putting a C-arm machine in. So now before we make any major investments like this, you definitely want to step back and give it some strategic thought. So we're going to need to ask ourselves a series of questions. Who are my customers? Do you have patients that have insurance that cover this procedure or the procedures that this new equipment will allow you to provide? How many patients are you currently referring out for this procedure? And most importantly, will your referring physicians be supportive of you providing this procedure? So for instance, I had worked with a multi-specialty group that had a physiatrist that wanted to purchase a C-arm machine. But the multi-specialty group got a lot of referrals from an orthopedic physician who also had a C-arm machine in his practice. And it certainly created a conflict when my client was looking to add this. So you want to make sure that by adding this service that you're not going to be disrupting those referral patterns. You also want to understand who's your competition, where are they located, and what alliances do they have. We know that alliances are being formed almost every day. Hospital systems are creating physician networks, some of them with 600 or 700 doctors in them. You have to understand that perhaps where you might have gotten referrals from those groups in the past, that now their alliances are going to be referring into their own medical group. So you want to be very cognizant of the competition and their alliances. We also have to have somebody that's going to take charge and manage this new procedure. So for instance, who has the skill set needed to perform the procedure? And most importantly, who's going to take responsibility for managing this new service line? You have to make sure that somebody is actually assigned to make sure that this new project moves forward. Because physicians often see technology they think will be great for their practice, really feel that this will benefit them. But if nobody's really managing the process, you may wind up acquiring equipment that will wind up just sitting in a back room and provide no value to the practice. And then you're certainly going to need to work through the details of providing the procedure. How does it affect clinical operations? How does it affect the administrative operations? And most importantly, what's the profitability analysis? So after you've formulated your business plan, and now that you've determined that your business idea is viable, now you have to strategically plan for executing it and making it a reality.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to the strategic plan. And the strategic plan is going to provide the direction for the practice. It provides a roadmap to accomplishing your business goals, whether they related to forming a new business or improving an existing one. And I was actually giving this some thought and consideration in lieu of the hurricane and all the damage that has been taking place and what we've witnessed in the last week. And I find it interesting, in our generation, we're so driven by technology, and we get in our cars and use our GPS, and if there's traffic, then we flip over to Waze, and we go on uncharted roads. But we're really relying on someone else to map out that plan. And I was reading all the stories about the hurricane. I came across one last night whereby it was stating that all of these GPS, the maps are not updated. So many people are being led to roads that are blocked. You know, there's blockades, they're water covered. And I was giving this thought in this for today that we're the ones who are in charge of the direction. We can't leave it to someone else. We can't wait for a map to be updated or technology to have their next upgrade. It's really up to you, the practice administrator, or the people involved in this process to really take hold of the direction that you would like to lead your practice in. So that was just some thoughts I had on it. But a strategic plan is generally short-term in nature. It typically spans 2 to 5 years and answers the questions of how, when, and where will you meet your goals. A well-structured strategic plan provides clear direction for the practice. It offers opportunity for the physicians, the owners, and managers to come together and collaborate in setting the future direction. It allows the practice to set up priorities. It offers the potential for enhanced financial performance and improved quality of patient care. Over the long term, a practice can use the strategic plan as a benchmark against which to measure progress in achieving the goals which have been set. Now, with that being said, is this easy? No, we're people. You know, this requires a lot of effort and planning. But we just wanted to provide you on the next slide with just a strategic planning cycle. And like we said, we keep repeating, this isn't to become cumbersome. Even if you had 2 goals and you wanted to take those goals through this process, maybe it's a growth goal and you want to have some hospital alliances. It could be a clinical goal, compliance, revenue cycle. Whatever that goal might be, it would still require the same cycle. So you would start with defining your goal as to where you want to go, what the desired outcome would be from this goal, how are you going to get there, your strategy. What are your strategies going to be? How are you going to measure your outcome and your success? And overall, your results. So this is, like I said, just a slide to just visually show you what that should look like. And then I found, I was reading and I found something that said, a forward-thinking leader develops This is revenue cycle, a revenue integrity program that unites groups and enables an organization to meet its goals. So it's truly a coming together. It's not solo. It's going to require a group effort. So Sue, why don't you now, let's go through some of the signs that indicate that a practice is in need of a strategic plan.
Great, because really probably almost every medical practice really needs a strategic plan, but here are some certain warning signs that your practice does. So if your practice doesn't have clear goals with measurable targets, you can't just continue to walk into a practice every day and just assume the practice is going to remain as successful as it is. If you have a lot of outdated systems and processes, I can't tell you how many practices I've gone into and asked why something was being done and been told, well, that's the way it's always been done. We have to think out of the box. We have very little time to spend in the practice. There's more and more demands on our time, so we need to look for ways to be as efficient as we possibly can in achieving our goals. If your practice has stagnant patient volumes, if you don't feel that your practice is growing or attracting new referral sources, and most importantly, if you have deteriorating financial performance.
In addition, low patient satisfaction results. This provides continual feedback and is it's an area of improvement. Lack of capital. When you don't have capital and financial resources, it's very difficult then to grow and move forward with some things that you might like to accomplish within the practice. That would also lead to the next bullet point, missed growth opportunities. Very difficult to grow if you don't have foresight as well as the capital. You might have underperforming personnel, maybe the person at your intake who's meeting the patients as they come in. Maybe there's some difficulty there. That difficulty is then going to lead to difficulty in your revenue cycle and collection. So it's something that really needs to be dealt with. And maybe you have a desire to affiliate with another healthcare entity or organization because that might then lead you to achieve your goal of growth.
Okay, so I'm going to just outline the specific sections of a formal strategic plan, and then we're going to dive into each one of these areas a little bit further so you can really make sure you understand the sections. So a vision statement. This is an aspirational statement and answers the question of where do we want this practice to go? It should be concise and easy to communicate, and it really focuses on tomorrow. What does the organization want to become? We also have a mission statement. This is your more public statement. This is going to focus on today and what the organization does. This defines your core business and explains the path to achieve your vision and what benefit you're going to provide to your customers. We also have a SWOT and gap analysis. These compare where the practice is versus where it hopes to be. They help to clearly identify gaps that you need to address and also identify your practice strengths, weaknesses, your growth opportunities, and potential threats. It should also contain growth and responsibility goals. Probably the most important takeaway from our session today will be that goals that you set, first off, you have to assign responsibility and ownership to, but most important, that they produce answers that are smart. By that we mean specific. How will the goal be, what goal will be accomplished? Measurable. How do you want to measure this goal? Achievable. Do you have the knowledge, skill, ability, and resources to achieve the goal? And is it realistic? Do not set goals that are completely unattainable, that will certainly affect morale and won't benefit your practice. And lastly, timely. You need to create a timeline that you're going to hold yourself to. And then lastly, once you come up with this wonderful plan, you have to make sure that you have continual monitoring. Progress toward goals should be monitored on a regular basis. Updates and challenges need to be communicated with your management team, and those responsible for the tasks need to be held accountable. So now we're going to dive into a little bit deeper to each one of these sections.
So now we're going to talk about the mission and the vision statement. The first two steps of the strategic plan, mission and vision, are very cathartic. But keep in mind that it is common for groups to come to the table with differing ideas of what the practice stands for and the direction it should take. Be sure to fully work through differing views to determine the best way forward. We see this when supergroups come together and they're used to practicing on their own, and even though they're coming together for various reasons and for the benefit of the practice in the end, it's a very difficult transition. It's difficult to transition cultures into a new culture, so we understand this is not easy. This is not one short meeting and session and it's all tied up nicely. In addition, by having an open dialogue and vetting these ideas, practices can unify their vision and mission and determine a direction the whole group can stand behind. Efficiency and effectiveness are much easier to obtain when the entire team is on the same page. And as we said earlier, sometimes this requires outside consultants. Sometimes you need someone else in the room just to help you get over the hump and work through this together.
And with different groups that we've sat down with, it's been very interesting as we've pulled the executive or management team together and asked them what they feel the practice stands for and what vision they have of the practice. It's very interesting to see how differing some of the views can be. And it's very important to let each person really explore their thoughts and walk away at the end of the process with a cohesive idea of what direction the practice is going in, because everybody has to march in the same direction.
And for some of these mission statements as well, they were devised many, many years ago. So it might be a good time also, maybe at an annual retreat, a board meeting, to go back and visit what was the initial mission statement of the practice, and then you could redefine it or add to it. Another thing in the strategic plan is the SWOT and/or gap analysis. This is beneficial when drilling down into internal and external factors that affect your practice. Internal factors pertain to your strengths and weaknesses. External include opportunities and threats in the marketplace. Right now, compliance-wise, we have the out-of-network bill. You might be an out-of-network facility. You have in-network opportunities, bundled payments, on and on it goes. There's just so many factors that affect your practice. Both need to be considered in the context of meeting your vision and mission, as these analyses will highlight gaps that your practice needs to address. And once again, you can just start in any area. You could take revenue cycle, disease management. There's so many areas that you could take this process and apply it to.
Right, and as we discussed before, goals and responsibilities. After your practice has defined its mission and vision, you need to make sure that you're positioned to accomplish them. Now you're going to move into the implementation stage of actually setting your goals. As we discussed, your goals have to be SMART, and at least one person must take ownership of them. This is critical because your plan will not move forward unless there's accountability for execution. I can't tell you how many meetings I've sat in where we've brainstormed and had a lot of great ideas and everybody charged out, all enthused, but because nobody really took ownership of making sure that those things happened, the next meeting we came to, those are all the same topics that we're addressing again as direction that we need to take. We don't have the time to be complacent. We really have to make sure that we're stepping up and having somebody responsible for that execution. Perhaps the easiest way to keep track of how you're doing with your goals is to set key performance indicators to track your process. We're going to talk about those in more detail, but throughout this whole process, be sure to receive input from all participants on how these goals are going to affect them to make sure that one step forward isn't actually two steps back. So it may be easy for the clinical person to say, okay, well, we're going to offer this procedure and this is going to generate this additional revenue. But it may be that there needs to be authorization done with the payer before the procedure is authorized. There could be upfront expenses that the finance department needs to plan for. So you need to have everybody involved in understanding the goals and what it will take to achieve the goals. And then you certainly need to continually monitor. At the end of the process, all members of the management team should agree to the goals and thoroughly understand their role in achieving them. And this is the time where if you have somebody that really is not buying into the overall goals, perhaps they're not right for your organization. You need everybody to feel cohesive, and perhaps the easiest thing to derail it is somebody that feels negative or is not supportive of the goals, because that will continue to slow the progress down. And you certainly want to be evaluating your goals on a continuous basis. You want to make sure that they're still relevant. In an ever-changing landscape like healthcare, new goals must be considered to counteract industry changes, or new directions may need to be discussed to meet increased demands or new trends that emerge.
Excuse the interruption. This is Dawn from Core Association Partners.
Yes.
We are having light flicker here, so in the event that we do lose power and the webinar goes down, we will reschedule, but hopefully we can get it in.
Okay. There are key performance indicators, as I mentioned, are really going to be important to help ensure that your goals are staying on track. And we outlined here a few different categories that most practices indicators will come from. So profitability, that's easy. Think of profit on your specific procedures. We have compliance. How many times did the doctor not sign off on a chart which prevented you from being able to submit a claim? Community, things like you want your practice to be very active in your community. Maybe you have one of the key performance indicators that you participate in healthcare fairs or those types of things. Administrative, that you want your claims turned around in a certain amount of time. Patient satisfaction, simple surveys that you can do. Or productivity, that you expect a certain number of work RVUs to be produced, etc. So this is really where you want to spend your time, making sure that you understand how we're going to measure those goals, and then make sure that everybody understands how the measurement is actually done.
As Sue just mentioned, we just wanted to give you a few examples of KPIs that you can utilize in meeting your goals. One here is the patient satisfaction score that you can utilize with your surveys through the patient portal, very easy to implement, and you can take that information and utilize it and see where it fits into something that you're trying to accomplish. Even something as, wait times or managing cancellations. I was reading an article in that, the millennials, they want everything electronically. When they take their child to the pediatrician, they want to communicate through email. They want to be able to access the physician after hours. They don't want to take their child during their work week. They want to go, a Saturday, a Sunday. It's a changing demographic. So by even utilizing some of these surveys, you'd be able to gain useful information that would help you see, are you satisfying or managing their expectations? On the financial side, you can have a KPI to determine the outstanding days of your accounts receivable or the charges per day. You can even, by looking at certain KPIs, determine, are you having a problem with a payer? That would be indicated by the dollars you're receiving determined by the charges that you're billing and your customary write-offs. So there's so much that you can measure with a KPI. We actually tailor them to our practices and the needs of our practice. So that's something that could really help you as you're going forward. So we know we've given you a lot. Like I said, it's an overview. We just want to try to help you in your next steps and where you need to be. It'd probably even be a good idea to even go back and pull out the business plan that maybe was started 20 years ago and just see what was outlined in that. But we also want to now give you some, a framework for building your financial framework. So start at the finish line. Determine what information is critical for your practice's success, and then develop a process for obtaining the information. Be sure to include the needed information for the KPIs. Create reports that present this information in an easy-to-read format. Produce these reports on regular intervals, and then work with the stakeholders to ascertain that this information is actionable. Communication is key. Meetings are key. As Sue had iterated, if someone takes responsibility for a portion of the goal, they're engaged. If someone's not engaged, they're going to have no follow-through or no impetus to continue in the process.
And I think one thing that I learned fairly early on in the process of working with physician groups is, as accountants, we're very number-oriented, and I get excited building big Excel spreadsheets. And I remember early on in my career, I prepared multi-page Excel reports and brought them into a meeting, and the doctors looked at me like, you're not expecting me to understand this. So over time, I've certainly gleaned my reports down to a simple one-page report that contains actionable information that everybody agrees is actionable information. You don't want to present numbers just to present numbers, as tempting as it may be for accountants. We want to make sure that the information that we're presenting really is going to be something that will help guide the practice. And you have to make sure that you give these out at regular intervals. You don't want to hold a physician, for example, to, let's say, a productivity goal and not let them know on a very regular basis how they're doing toward that productivity goal. Because first off, you're going to turn them off if you're telling them after they can make modifications to their productivity. And as soon as people stop being engaged in this process, the wheels are going to stop. So you want to make sure that you do get everybody's buy-in and understanding of the numbers, and don't overwhelm them with information. I'd like to have practices monitor data, these KPIs, and this data I have outlined on here on a rolling 12-month report. Simple things like tracking, charges, collections, and adjustments. The collection ratio determined both on gross and net collections. Your accounts receivable aging reports, the days in accounts receivable, and the average revenue per day or per patient. Just tracking these things can help you spot issues that might be occurring in the practice. So for instance, if your practice has typically had a collection ratio of 65%, and just to clarify, collection ratios can be widely different depending upon your practices. Just because you might hear another practice has a collection ratio of 50%, and let's say yours is 35%, that doesn't mean that your practice is operating any less effectively. It just simply means that your fee schedule is higher, and therefore when you apply the real collections that you have against it, it might be a little bit lower. But paying attention to that collection ratio, it should be very consistent. And if you spot a situation where that collection ratio starts to drop, it can be indicating that perhaps your claims are being rejected for not having a specific diagnosis code that links with the CPT code. So simple things like even tracking a collection percentage can really help provide valuable data right up front so that you know if there's going to wind up being a cash flow issue. Accounts receivable aging is so important, understanding how long is it taking for you to collect your money. And I'd really like even looking at what's my average revenue per day. You want to keep track of that, really understand how that's changing in your practice over time. And then you can certainly run these reports in all types of ways. You can run them by provider. You can run them by insurance carrier or by CPT code. And when you do that, it's fascinating the data that you can walk away with. And as I mentioned, you want to make sure it's actionable data.
So now we're going to spend a few minutes just talking about a budget. In the last few years, with the rollout of the value-based care and the decline in reimbursements, practices have really, really suffered with their stream of revenue. So one thing you can do is set out a budget each year to determine and have, once again, a plan as to what your costs are going to be for that year. So create an annual budget for both the clinical and administrative functions of the practice. Assign responsibility to team members for meeting those budgets. Once again, when you have your meetings, not sure how often they are, but bring up budget items. Hold everyone accountable. The more that someone knows what's going on in your practice, the more they take on a sense of responsibility for what's taking place. Run regular budget to actual reports so corrective actions can be taken if needed. And also, once again, it's indicative of what's taking place. Maybe there's some issue with the supply, whatever it might be in your practice, but when you look at your budget to your actual, maybe it's just a timing issue, but at least then you're prepared and you can take a corrective course of action to determine what you need to do. And once again, communication. Make sure that everyone is notified, that it's not a surprise, once again, that you're not withholding the information and, oh, hopefully it'll correct itself. No, the more you communicate, the more you have other individuals who can help rectify and change the course of action.
Okay, so I know we've thrown a lot of information out at you. Really, our distilling it down is you need to plan. But we wanted to leave you with a few things to keep in mind, that when you develop your plans, I love this quote by this gentleman, Jim Rohn, that I really felt was very interesting, very relevant to the healthcare industry. You can't change your destination overnight, but you can change your direction overnight. It's never too late to start planning and to start creating the road ahead. Medical practices that invest in developing a strategic plan, a business plan, and financial plan are much better equipped to evolve, adapt, and change direction as healthcare reform continues. So, for example, if you're a primary care practice and there's an urgent care center that opens up down the road, because you have an infrastructure in place, you have a management team that's nimble enough that now perhaps you can add additional hours to your practice to make you more accessible like that urgent care center, if that's something your practice would find feasible. And again, as Debbie had mentioned, your plans should help communications, which is so critical, and provide your team members with a firm understanding of the practice goals, the direction to reach them, and their part in obtaining them. After all, it's so much easier to get one boat to a destination if everybody's rowing in the same direction.
In addition, keep in mind that business plans and strategic plans are not static, but they're works in progress and should be reviewed at least once on an annual basis. Once again, if you have an annual retreat, you have board meetings, whatever it is within your practice, if you're smaller and it's not so organized, make the time. Make some time to sit down and review these things together as an organization. The failure to update a plan can lead to complacency. As the external healthcare environment changes, any plans your practice has developed must be updated to reflect the current and anticipated shifts in the internal and external environment.
Okay, so we wanted to allow enough time at the end for questions. So Alex, I don't know if you're able to provide us with any questions.
Yeah, so we don't have any questions right now. If anyone has any questions, you can type them in the question box, and we'll just give everyone a minute or two
Great.
to see if any come in. And if no one has any questions, we can go ahead and end the webinar for today, and we will be sending out the recorded version and the PowerPoint.
Okay, terrific.
Well, thank you. Thank you for
everybody.
your time.
Have a good day, everyone.